Hey everybody, I'm Jay Scherr with Jay Scherr Business Consulting. We help entrepreneurs, business owners, and other leaders maximize their potential, build rock-solid foundations for their businesses, and create more freedom in their lives. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. The Greek poet Archilochus said, "We don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training." Well, on today's episode, we talk about training and why it is mission critical, the power of teamwork, building resilience, managing stress and anxiety, and more. My guest is a highly decorated Navy SEAL veteran who served nearly 2 decades in the Special Operations community, including 6 years at SEAL Team 2 and 11 years at Naval Special Warfare Development Group, known as DEVGRU. He had 12 combat deployments supporting operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa. At DEVGRU, he served as a team leader for a 24-man counterterrorism unit that conducted numerous missions pursuing high-value targets and conducting hostage rescue operations worldwide. He's a father of 2 and an entrepreneur who, following his service, started a company that provides tactical, security, and leadership consulting to DoD, law enforcement agencies, and private corporations. In addition, he founded a 501c3 to improve community safety by providing no-cost training to police officers. Please welcome the founder of BlueForce Strategic Action Group and Community First Project, Andrew Sullivan. Andrew, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me, and thank you for the great introduction.
Absolutely, it is my pleasure, and I am very much looking forward to this conversation. So let's dive right in. First,
absolutely,
I would love it if you would share with all of us what your favorite thing is about yourself and why.
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I like my drive. I think I'm supposed to say my kids is my favorite thing about myself, but let's, as it applies to this chat, right? I'm a driven person, and what motivates me might be a little different than some, but I have the drive to succeed in whatever I do, and I've always had it, and it's gotten me this far in life. I think I've been successful in most everything I've done, and yeah, that's what I attribute it to.
I love that. So since you mentioned that you've had that drive to succeed for most of your life, can you give us an example, if we were to wind the clock back, maybe an example from your youth of where that drive became evident to you?
I was always a competitive kid. It didn't matter what I did. I had an older brother, and I just wanted to be better than him at everything. Not just better looking than him. I wanted to be better than him at everything. And we played sports all the time, and he was a year and a half older. He grew a lot faster than me, so he was always bigger and stronger and faster. And man, I would get upset when I'd lose, and I hated to lose. So it was instilled in me early that if you got to win, you got to be able to do whatever it takes to be the best. And I probably should attribute that to my brother Matt.
Excellent. And were you the better looking of the
Still
two
am.
of you?
Still
are. Well, we'll see if Matt agrees with that one.
Well, I'm bigger and stronger than him now, so he can't disagree with me.
All right, perfect. So let's stay back in time a little bit, and I would love it if you would share a bit about your backstory, and specifically what I'd be interested to find out is, as you think about your parents or your upbringing, were there specific lessons that you learned that were instilled in you from your parents that you carry with you that helped to shape who you've become?
Absolutely. I think my entire adult life is shaped from my childhood, and I wouldn't say I had I would say I had a very typical childhood based on my family and my heritage. My parents are still together after all these years, and it was me and my brother, and we had parents who we didn't have a lot growing up. We weren't in dire straits by any means, but my parents worked multiple jobs and night shifts and did whatever it took to do better. And I saw that from an early age. And I remember elementary school, I would get home as one parent was getting home from work and the other parent was leaving for work and would work the night shifts. I don't really have any memory of my parents not being in school, continued education as adults, which wasn't as common back then. My dad getting his degree in his 40s, and every time I make a mistake on a timeline, they call me the next day and give me hell. So I hope I got that right. But and my mom, starting as a nurse and getting to become a nurse practitioner, and then her doctorate in nursing, there was no quit. There was no, and this is probably the big one for me, there was no time in my childhood and young adult life, and even adult life, where my parents stopped trying to learn and be better. And I took that to heart. And I think I am the same way. I got my master's degree at 44. So I'm a lifelong learner, and that's something they instilled in me at an early age.
Wow, that's amazing. Is it the same for your brother Matt?
I mean, he was born a genius, so I don't know that he had the same struggle we did. Not literally. I mean, I don't want to give him too much credit, but he was always a smart kid, and he's a lawyer now in South Carolina, and he's been very successful at what he does, and I definitely see it in him on the educational and the legal side. He's good at what he does, and he's always trying to do better. So wow. It's a family trait.
Yeah, that's incredible. So had you had family members who were in the military?
Yeah, my father was in the National Guard.
Okay.
And I think 6 years. God, I got yelled at for getting that wrong. Man, I'm in so much trouble. So my grandfather, though, was a Marine, and he enlisted right after Pearl Harbor, which my brother pointed out the similarities to me and my grandfather. I enlisted because of 9/11 the next day. Same thing with my grandfather at 17 years old. He went and enlisted in the Marines and served his country. So those were the two people that I had to look up to in the military. And yeah, I guess I followed in the footsteps.
Absolutely. So speaking of your grandfather, did you have the opportunity to have many conversations with him around his military experience, what it was like being in the Marines, and did that at all light that fire for you?
Not at all. He never talked about it. Just a different generation of people. I remember asking him when I was younger about his service and not really getting any answers, and just never talked about it again. And even when I was in my first couple of deployments in Iraq, I remember vividly sitting overseas thinking about my grandfather and how much harder they had it in their generation being at war, and wanting to talk to him about it and never getting the opportunity to do so. Wow. And it's funny you bring it up. Over the past couple months, as I've been doing podcasts, my grandfather has come up a lot because he was a role model and a mentor for me on that side. And my family has shared stories that they knew about him in World War II that I didn't know. And it's really opened up a box for me that I didn't know existed, and it's been great. And I wish I could go back and talk to him and find out more.
Now, was this your mother's father or your father's father?
Yes. Mother's father.
Mother's father. And did she know many of these stories that were shared, or did you hear about some of these through other family members on that side?
Mostly my brother and my mother. Not too many other family members. He didn't open up to many people about his experiences in war. I have an uncle who's an author, John Dufresne, and he has actually interviewed my grandfather a few times for some of his, a lot of his characters come from our family members.
Wow.
And so we have some footage, audio footage of my grandfather talking about some of his experiences, but he did have dementia. So, it's a little bit earlier on before it was really bad, but it's kind of cool to be able to go listen to him talk about these things.
That is so interesting. So, as I think about that and look at where we are today, you mentioned that you've been on a number of podcasts, so we're able to record, obviously, whether it's video and audio or both, these historical conversations, right? To be able to talk about the past, to be able to talk about the experiences you've had and have these documented where they last forever, right? They're not going anywhere. Do you think about that as you're having these conversations, and does that mean anything to you?
I didn't until just now. And I see the irony in that I don't like to talk about my experiences in war. And I don't do it on podcasts. I talk about mindset and leadership and resilience and the things that you mentioned at the beginning of the episode. But I don't talk about the specific situations that I was in or gunfights or locations, things like that. I just think it's better left there. And it's something I'll have with the people I was with. And that's who it should stay with. So I guess, in a way, I'm connected to my grandfather more than I know. So on the other side, being able to talk about what I've learned and how it's relative to what I'm doing now has been fantastic. And it's been a great way for me to expose my nonprofit specifically to law enforcement across the country. It's such a unique experience that we have. And I'm glad I'm still young enough to be able to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the fact that you can talk about the parts that you want to talk about really give context to everything that you're doing today, right? So it tells the story, and it's not someone just reading something about you and about your life. You can tell the story from your own perspective, and I think that's so incredibly important. So so I appreciate you sharing that. So
thank you.
I have found throughout my own life, through my own experiences, through the people that I have come in contact with and that are mentors, etc., that, there seem to be moments in life, and it may not be just one moment, it can be a multitude of moments, but moments that can actually change the course of our lives, that can change the trajectory of our lives. So you mentioned about 9/11 and about the reason that you enlisted. Would that be the one moment that you would point to that changed the course of your life, or is there another one as well?
Absolutely. 9/11 for me, I always had the SEAL teams in the back of my head from a young age, and I don't know where it came from, and I don't think I ever knew a Navy SEAL or, other than reading a book or seeing the movie with Charlie Sheen. That was kind of the extent of my knowledge of what a SEAL was. I just knew they were the best, and that intrigued me. But to pick up my life and try to challenge myself to that extent, knowing, it was going to lead to me being overseas in a way, it was a hard commitment for me to make. And so I had the drive. I didn't have the motivation to do that. And 9/11, and think of how many millions of lives were changed because of 9/11. Even people who weren't directly involved, like me, who had a call to service because of it. And, very similar to Pearl Harbor in that generation. That absolutely changed my life. And I am where I am right now because of it.
So, and I want to stay on that here for a moment, but as you mentioned that you had always had SEAL teams kind of somewhere in the back of your mind, although you didn't have a whole lot of experience around it, right? Maybe a book, maybe a movie. But what did you visualize? I mean, maybe that's a little difficult to ask now since you've had all these experiences, but what did the SEAL teams represent to you before all of this that just said, this is something that I should be thinking about?
Yeah, it's so Massachusetts, to go way back here, it's a very liberal state, but it is one of the most patriotic places I've been, and to this day. And I remember growing up, and my neighbor, who was like another grandmother to me, lost her son in Vietnam, and we used to talk about him quite a bit. And you drive around Worcester, there's American flags hanging everywhere on every overpass, and it's just Massachusetts in general. You come up to a traffic circle, or rotary as we call them, and there's a placard in the middle of it dedicated to a soldier that died in Vietnam or World War II or World War I. It's so patriotic that I grew up with that patriotism in me, and kind of infatuated, for lack of a better term, in the service, in the military, and what they did. And I think, kind of where I went wrong is that, and we can blame TV or movies, watching the A-Team too much, I don't know, is that we kind of glamorized what the military and the service life actually was, and what going to combat actually was. And probably the best recruiting tool that special operations has is Hollywood showing special operators as these mean, tough, badass killing machines, right? And I didn't know any better at 16, 17, 18, whatever the age was. I thought that that's what it was. And I thought we were going to go over there and, kick our enemies' asses and just be these mean, bad fighting machines. And, there was a certain level of anger after 9/11 and of responsibility of, well, I'm sitting here doing this job. I'm healthy. I'm ready. Why am I not over there, fighting for our country, fighting for my kids and my family's safety? Like that's me. That's my job. I have to do that. And I was in the recruiter's office the next day. And, how soon can I get on the road and get to boot camp? And I want to be a SEAL because I wanted to be on the front lines.
So prior to 9/11, day before, let's say, what was life like for Andrew Sullivan? Just give us a snapshot of where you were at this stage in life.
So I had moved from Massachusetts to Maryland and was just living with high school, college friends, working for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, of all places. And believe it or not, I learned a lot about running a business working for them. I wasn't happy. I kind of, in a way, had lost a little bit of the drive to be successful. And, I always wanted to play sports. I always wanted to do something outside of an office, and just the thought of working in an office or doing a 9-to-5 just never appealed to me. And again, the motivation came with the attack. So I went to work, and I remember I was in a BMW dealership in Maryland, and just stopped my day watching the towers get hit and what was going on, and realizing this is a generational changing event. And I'm watching these people come in who were more concerned about getting their car dropped off so they could get to work and didn't really care what was going on TV. And I thought, man, what is going on in their lives that they can't see that how impactful this is going to be on our country and on the world. And I decided at that spot that no, I'm not staying here. I'm not doing this. This isn't me. I can do something. I can make a difference. Where do I go?
So did you have that conversation with anyone else prior to you just made the decision, you walk in the very next day?
I'm a very independent person. I don't discuss things with other people. Some might call me impulsive, and I definitely can be in many ways. And it clicked. As I'm sitting there watching it, my dad was working, not too far from the Pentagon in D.C., and not being able to get through on phones and find out what's going on. Decision was made. There was no talking to anybody. And nobody would have talked me out of it either. My family is been 100% supportive of my career throughout it. And even though, I'm sure as a mother, watching your son go off to war 12 times isn't an easy thing to do. But she was really good about, keeping those feelings on the inside and being supportive, because that's what I needed. I didn't need to be worried about my family while I was over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you learn about yourself after you enlisted, as you were going through BUDS? What were some of the things that you were discovering about yourself, if there were any things that you discovered?
I mean, every day you're discovering something new, right? I think, the training really pushed my body to the limit, to past the point of what I thought I was capable of. And, I never thought I would quit, never thought about quitting, but at the same time, I didn't know what to expect. And there were times where I wake up and they're like, this is impossible. There's no way we can do this. And then you do it. And it's a mindset shift, right? And it's really what it is BUDS is to teach you that you are far more capable than you've ever been told or thought you could do. And you're breaking those mental barriers that inhibit performance. That's what BUDS is. It's just a kick in the balls.
Now, you were a few years older than some of the other folks that were going through the training at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was on the older side of the class, probably one of the top 5 of the class age-wise.
So I'm asking that question because I would love it if you would just speak to what was the difference there? Was it more the physical side of things? Was it mental at all? How was that an advantage for you or a disadvantage?
So it was both, to be honest. It's funny when you talk about a year or two, and I'll direct people towards pro sports. You know, a 30-year-old athlete is ancient, right? A 18-year-old athlete is a baby. And, you know, that's 12 years difference, but it's huge. And when you get to something as physical as BUD/S, the difference between 18 and 24 is significant on your body's ability to recover. So for me, and it's funny, I still have a friend who was 18 at the time, and complete stud, right? 18, maybe just not smart enough to be hurt, but, you know, he finished Hell Week and he went and got dinner with his family. And the rest of us are just passed out on the ground, like in a pizza and a Gatorade, just wanting to die. Wow. And he just didn't know any better. But in actuality, the 18-year-olds are the first ones to quit. And a lot of that comes with the maturity of having a little bit of life experience outside of high school and being with your family. And, you know, these kids leave home with an idea of what they're going to do and, you know, are wet and sandy at 5 o'clock in the morning and realize that they probably bit off more than they can chew on the mental side. And then you start getting into the 24 to 25-year-olds like me who have a different perspective, have done life, gone to college, or been in the workforce on their own, know what they're going back to if they don't make it, and their perspective is quite different. But on the physical side, your body's ability to recover has changed. So a nagging knee injury can be debilitating, whereas you won't get that at 18 or 19. So for me, it was a constant battle to stay ahead of injury. And, you know, I never thought I was going to quit, but I was always in the back of my head, well, don't get hurt. Just don't get hurt and you'll be fine. And a lot of guys do get hurt. And that sweet spot is that like 20 to 23-year-old guy that, you know, had some college or, you know, life experience and was still fit and young enough that the body recovered. And that's kind of the sweet spot. So, and I say this 20 plus years ago, the sports science side of our community has expanded so much that, you know, those numbers are probably expanding even because it's doing it in pro sports as well. So.
Absolutely. So when you made the comment that you didn't know what to expect, did you view that, or do you view that now through a different set of lens as a positive thing? Had you known what to expect, let me rephrase it. Had you known what to expect, would it have changed at all, the experience, or not?
I don't think it would have changed the actual experience of BUD/S. I think I would have had a lot more anxiety because I tell people this, and I don't think they really get it, but this is a great way to phrase it. The hardest part of BUD/S is waiting for what's about to happen. And when, you know, my biggest piece of advice to someone going to BUD/S is always be first in an evolution, especially a pass-fail evolution, because the first time you watch someone fail that you thought was going to pass, you already psyched yourself out. So to me, having too much knowledge going into it can be a little bit detrimental.
Yeah, that's a huge point. That always be first mentality. Yeah. I would assume, I don't like to assume, but I would assume for a moment that you experienced that firsthand. So probably not being the first one and what that did to you from a psychological perspective.
Absolutely. You know, and I am a pretty confident person, and I think I was at the point in BUD/S and whatever I do in life to where I put myself in the best situation mentally and physically, and I have enough confidence that I'm going to succeed. So mindset, it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So I'm coming at this from someone who just does not know, so bear with me as I'm thinking through this.
Absolutely.
But what is the difference between SEAL Team 2 and DEVGRU? And when I'm asking about the difference, is it difference in terms of people skills, in terms of leadership, overall experience? Can you simplify that for us?
I can, and that's one of those topics we kind of have to walk a fine line talking about DEVGRU, right? So we call them white side teams, which are the even and odd number teams. You finish buds, your training, and you go to advanced training, and then you get chosen to a team. And typically you'll spend 4 years, which is 2 rotations, 2 workups and 2 deployments on that team. For me, it was SEAL Team 2.
Okay.
So, at this point, I'm 28, 29, and you screen, which means you volunteer to go to development group, which is it's a next tier SEAL team, and you either get selected to try out or you don't. So of all the candidates that go to buds, it's about a 60 to 70% attrition rate. And then those students will go to a team, and of that 20 to or 30 to whatever percent, they'll select maybe 25% of those guys to try out for Dev Group. And then it's another 8-month selection course to get there. So you have SEALs with multiple combat deployments in most cases, 4 years to 5 years of experience at a team in a team environment training, who are now trying to move up to the next tier. So it's a pretty elite of the elite organization. And given that they've already gone through all this prior training in teams, usually older and more mature guys with the experience. And in that course, you'll lose another 60% to attrition. Wow. So it really is we call it the tip of the spear in the military. It's the place most guys want to get to do the operations that guys want to do.
So obviously we won't talk details at all, but I'm just curious from a pure leadership perspective, did you learn the most about becoming a leader or what leadership truly means and team building once you made that transition, or did you feel like you had that level of experience that could carry you forward?
I think I had some great leadership at all levels, to include pre-military. And I say this to people now, one of the best leaders I ever met was at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And I took things from him that I used throughout the entirety of my military career because he was that good. Right? Great leadership is everywhere if you know what you're looking for. And I've also had some really terrible leadership throughout my career, military and pre. Even in the elite teams in the SEAL teams, I've still had bad leaders. And I learned from them too, though. And if you can sit there and you can complain, or you can try to find ways to make it better and to learn and make yourself a better leader from it. So there was never a point in my life, truly, where I wasn't trying to become better at my craft, and leadership is part of my craft. To this day, and even as an entrepreneur owning a couple companies, I want my people to be happy, and when I go out and I serve the community and the nonprofit, I want the recipients of my education to be happy as well. And to me, that just means I have to always try to improve all my skills, including leadership.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm hearing the first part of our conversation as you were telling me about your mother and your father and that continuous learning and always wanting to improve and get better and never stop learning. I mean, that's what I'm hearing here as well.
Absolutely. Throughout
this story. So I can't let this piece go, since you happen to mention that the manager you had at Enterprise was one of the best leaders you've seen, and you took some incredible lessons away from him or her. What share with us? I mean, because we have an audience of business owners, of entrepreneurs, of leaders, of managers. What was it?
I'll boil it down to 2 things: patience and communication. He had an uncanny ability to relate to everybody who worked with him, and he could do it in a way. So Enterprise is one of the largest hirers of college graduates in the country. And if you ever go into an Enterprise, you see the majority, 99% of the people working there are fresh out of college. So, a lot of people that work there haven't quite got college out of their system. The nightlife part of it, right? So you're working with 20-somethings who still want to have a good time and enjoy life and do all that. And that can be difficult as someone who isn't much older. And he wasn't much older than me at the time. But you also have people that really have no business experience, and you're trying to teach them how to run a business. And it's not a franchise, but it's run kind of like each branch is its own little franchise from the financial perspective. And he was so patient with me and me trying to understand what we're doing and to get better at it, and get better at sales, because I was never good at sales, which is the irony now is all I do go around and ask for money because I run a nonprofit. But
Sure.
His patience and his ability to be able to communicate things that people didn't understand in a manner that made it palatable and understandable was second to none. I've never seen anybody do it better.
Wow.
And it's always stuck with me. And he was just a great person. So, yeah, easy person to like, easy person to work for.
So have you stayed in touch with him to let him know what the impact was that he had on you?
No, and I would love to. And, if, I've never run into him on social media either. I've looked a few times, and if I saw him, I absolutely would, because he deserves the credit. And I really hope he's doing well now for himself. And, man, I would hire him in a heartbeat.
Excellent. Very good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the transition from your military service to civilian life. Speak to what that process was like for you, making that transition. Easy, hard, difficult? What were you thinking about? And just give us an idea of what that experience is like.
It was pretty miserable for me because it was right in the middle of COVID. So my transition date was actually, I hadn't been to work in about 6 months anyway, because we were shut down, maybe a little less than that. So getting out, and I had a plan, but I didn't have a plan. And COVID didn't help me, solidify whatever that plan was. I knew I wanted to train law enforcement, and it was a for-profit venture. And that's kind of how I got started. But at the same time, it was really hard to train law enforcement when you couldn't go within 8 feet of anybody, right? So it wasn't an easy transition. However, I had the benefit of having a retirement, healthcare. My kids' tuition is already covered. Like I was never in dire straits to where I had to take a job just to make money. My quality of life didn't change, but I also didn't have any growth. So it was frustrating at times. It wasn't as easy as I wanted it to be, but once I got some focus, the drive is always there, and I had the mission, which was helping law enforcement, and I pressed on, and
Excellent.
I started one department at a time.
So you had already had some relationships or some experience with either training or involvement with the law enforcement community. Talk about that. What type of work were you doing, and how did that set you up for being able to move through that transition and then ultimately starting your first company?
Yeah, absolutely. God, as long as I've been in the SEAL teams, we've had relationships with law enforcement, whether it's local here in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, all the departments around here, where we offer to train them as just relationship building. And, at times we will be in other areas. We'll travel to different states to use their training venues just to get different looks, because we train every day. So our training venues become old. We memorize floor plans, and it's hard to learn when you're using the same floor plan. So, cities will host us to come up and train there, and the way that we can return the favor is by training their SWAT teams. And, we've done that for, as long as I can remember. So I've had the ability to train police before, and I've done it for 2 decades, 15 years before I even got out of the service and started my company. And I absolutely loved it, because no one appreciates the training more than law enforcement, because they don't get it otherwise, and they need it. And so I knew getting out that, I could train, and I wanted to be able to deliver some of the lessons that I'd learned over the prior 2 decades in sustained combat to the people that were asking to go into a building where there's a shooter killing children, right? And unfortunately, that's the officer that has the least amount of training, but they were closest in proximity to the event. So when I started that company, and I reached out to my contacts in law enforcement and told them I'd come do it for free. And I started a for-profit company. It wasn't a nonprofit at this point, but I wanted to get my name out there and my brand out there. So I go to Boston, go to Florida, departments I'd worked with before, we'll set up some training. We'll run you guys through it, and you guys just let us know what you think, and we'll adjust accordingly. And, we were training SWAT teams. And as we're doing that, I'm watching television and I'm seeing critical incidents play out on TV and realizing that the people that I'm training are not the same police officers I'm seeing on TV. And, I identified the big training discrepancies that we're seeing in law enforcement are in the patrol officer sector, school resource officers. And, they're being asked to do a Navy SEAL mission with at most 40 hours of training, probably more like 8 hours or no training at all. And the hardest mission you could think, which is going into a building where someone is already shooting, has the advantage both tactically and probably equipment, better armed, and you're going in there by yourself to get that person. That is the hardest thing you could possibly do. And we're asking someone with no training to do it. And that didn't sit right with me. And, Paul Fitzgerald, who is my partner in the nonprofit, is the retired superintendent of Boston Police. I called him and told him what I was thinking and that I wanted to do a nonprofit. And, we have a pretty big network of people up in Boston, and we decided that's where we were going to start because we had to do the fundraising side of it too. And that's where it came from. And that it was, the drive is there. Now my motivation was watching all this stuff happen on TV, and it was, all right, let's go. Let's make it happen. And I never looked back. And so my for-profit shifted, and my for-profit became my nonprofit. And in 13 months, we've raised $500,000 and trained over 500 officers. And we have 5 more departments we're training in the next 2 months. So wow. It's been outrageously successful, and the unfortunate part of that is there's not enough money to meet the demand. You just couldn't fund 700,000 officers that need training, and there's only one of me, and so we're trying to figure out ways to make it scalable so we can do this in every state.
So I think it's important for us to talk about some of the challenges that you have seen specifically with different agencies around the country and why I think this is an important conversation. And just as a side note, and you're aware of this, Andrew, but this is an area that's near and dear to my heart as my son is a law enforcement officer. And just knowing some of the specifics around that agency. It's a smaller agency. So imagine in a community you have a smaller agency that doesn't, to your point, that doesn't have the resources to be able to do this level training because most of their officers are doing the everyday things that officers do, which may be, traffic stops and, house checks and, they get the call for the overdose or in death or, those kinds of things. But those incidences that come up, those high level incidences that they're may or may not have the training or preparation for, you're putting these officers in a position to respond to something like that. And I can't even imagine what that must be like to have to walk through that door. So speak to those challenges that you see with these law enforcement agencies, because you are filling such an important role with the work that you're doing today. And as I told you off camera, man, I'm telling you, we are blessed that you're doing this work because it is so critical to safety in all of our communities nationwide.
Yeah, and I'm my company, my nonprofit is about community safety. That is our mission. And the way we achieve community safety is by providing our protectors with the right amount of training, or at least the right training that they're not getting. And when we look at the shortfall, there's so many of them. And, a big part of what I do is not offending people. And I don't want to offend the law enforcement community. I'm very supportive and protective of them. But at the policymaker level and the leadership level, things need to change. And I think that is one of the biggest issues right now is law enforcement does great work at about 98% of their job, right? The part of their job where they can train on the job because it's things that they do on a daily basis. Where we're seeing failure is that 1% to 2% of the job where it maybe happens once in a career or twice in a career. And you can't train for that on the job because it doesn't happen. So now, when it does happen, we debrief it and we realize all these mistakes that were made. And I always point to Uvalde for this. All those mistakes could have been fixed in training. And it's not. And for whatever reason, we don't prioritize that type of training because it doesn't happen enough to justify spending all the money on it. And, I look at the federal level, we're sending how many hundreds of millions of dollars overseas to help other countries stabilize when we could be spending $100 million here to help, our officers get better training or whatever it is. But I look at it from my background as someone who trains for 12 months to go work for 4 months. And that's to be in a daily active shooter situation sometimes, right? We're going out the door every time we're getting shot at. So I trained for 12 months to be able to do that on top of all my core training that I did throughout my career, BUDS and follow-on training. Law enforcement trains for 40 hours of in-service training a year. And that is every aspect of their job that doesn't get covered otherwise. So you got a new computer program, guess what? That's going in that 40 hours. It's not tactical training the whole time. And we are asking our officers to do a Navy SEAL level mission on that caliber of training. That is absurd to me. And then what makes it even worse nowadays is that when they fail, we want to sue them at best. At worst, we want to prosecute them and throw them in jail. And I'm not just talking about active shooter stuff, but I'm talking about officers who are overwhelmed by situations because they are not prepared adequately under stress and they make critical mistakes under fire. And then we try to criminalize it. So, something needs to change. And I am as much an advocate for changing how law enforcement trains as I am for providing the training to them. And, it's a conversation that needs to happen, and it's slowly starting to happen.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So walk us through, give us an idea so we can visualize this. If you're working with a new law enforcement agency that has an interest in the training, what does that process look like? How long are they working with you? What is the onboarding process? You don't have to get too specific, but how long are you meeting with them? What are you looking for? And what does the training entail?
So most of what we do is tactical training. We'll do some firearms proficiency, but as it applies to, and I always like to say active shooter, but it's really critical incidents. I am teaching officers how to better perform under stress. That is the common denominator that I can break it down to is performance under stress and making better decisions. And we use close quarters battle, CQB, tactical training to do that. Typically, we meet a department and we will train them for a week. And I say that, but the relationship is ongoing. Any department I work with now has 365 access to me to help them with whatever they need. And I am trying to build this network of people with my experience who are available to officers at any time to talk tactics, to talk gear, to talk procedure, to talk leadership, resiliency, all this stuff. I want relationships. I don't want transactions. So when I come in, and I will tell this to any department I work with, I can't teach you how to be a Navy SEAL in 40 hours, right? It took me 20 years to get where I got. So what I can do is I can come in. I don't have a curriculum. I'm not teaching you something new. I'm going to take your curriculum and I'm going to make it better because I think that's a better use of our time since it's limited. And what I say is in 40 hours, I might not be able to make you significantly better, but I can highlight a lot of the problems. And then on the tail end, I can help you build a better training curriculum to correct those problems over time. But there isn't a program out there, nonprofit or for-profit, that is going to fix this problem in 40 hours. It's problem identification and then building a plan to fix it. That's the commitment I ask from the departments that I'm training.
In those departments that you have trained or are training, what type of feedback do you get? Is there a loop that there's follow-up so you can reassess or evaluate how they're doing? Yeah. Is the training sticking, etc.?
Absolutely. And, we do peer evals after and have them fill it out. And, I have stacks of paper. It's the best training we've ever had. And it's not not just me, right? There are other companies. I don't know of any other nonprofits doing this, but people with my experience, my background are going to be able to provide that level of training, right? Just because that's what I did for a career. I wasn't a police officer. I was a tactician. Tactics were my career. And right now, that's the problem law enforcement is having, is they don't have fundamental understanding of tactics. So I'm coming in and I'm teaching fundamentals. I'm reinforcing fundamentals that they should know, but they don't because they don't train to it. And, that comes off, we're subject matter experts, and we are. It's like bringing in an NFL player to teach your high school kid how to throw a football, right? You have the best in the world at this specific job teaching you. And it's just another tool for the law enforcement tool belt.
So let's talk just briefly about managing stress and anxiety. So being put into these situations obviously can be incredibly stressful. So are you providing, so when you talk about doing the fundamentals, right, when we get the fundamentals right and you go through this training, does that help you be able to manage that stress, or for an officer, they would be able to better manage that stress? Or is there another component or something else that they have to go through?
Well, that's the first step, right? When I talk about fundamentals, we want that to be something where you don't have to think to do, right? It's something that is innate and natural, and that isn't happening right now. So when you have these incredibly stressful life or death situations, and you're trying to figure out something that should be innate, then you've already lost that battle. And you can think about that figuratively or literally, right? So what we do is we just have this crawl, walk, run mentality that we do in the teams, where we start really slow, we hammer these fundamentals, and then when they have a grasp on the fundamentals, we add stress. And really where law enforcement, I think, is falling short is they don't train under stress. So you go to these active shooter courses and they'll teach it and they'll kind of spoon feed the information and do PowerPoints and talk about prior events. But when it comes to doing experiential learning, they're not adding the stress of failure or of live role players shooting back at them, things that are going to make them work in an uncomfortable environment. And the better you are at being uncomfortable, the more tolerant you are at handling stress when it's real. And so I don't do classroom work. I'll come in, I'll introduce myself, I'll talk about my program, I'll see if anybody has any questions, and then it's jock up and meet me in the house and let's go. Let's get to work, because that's where the learning is going to happen. And depending on how fast they progress, and some departments are better than others, we'll throw some pretty complicated scenarios at them and see how they react.
So what I love about this approach is you have removed the excuse that we don't have the finances to be able to pay for this type of training. So with that said, knowing that you provide this training at no cost to the agency itself, talk about the component of this where businesses can get involved, where those who are interested in donating can get involved, because that obviously is an important piece to this.
It is. And like I said a little bit ago, there isn't enough money right now for me to meet the demand. Since I started hitting the podcast circuit and going on TV and talking on news shows, the requests I get, it's 15 different states now where I've had officers reach out to me for help. And I don't want to say no, and I won't say no. And we'll figure out ways to get it done. I just need help sometimes from those departments. So we've started now. There's three real, money-raising pillars for us. One is private donorship, and that was never intended to be our sole source of income. That was a stopgap until we could attack the state and federal market and get grants to be able to sustain some of what we're doing. And we have done that in Massachusetts. We've gotten money from the state, which significant as a military organization or prior military going into a very liberal state, but like I said, super patriotic, and getting them to invest in us because they saw value in what we were doing for their communities. And the third one is corporate sponsorship, which is where we're really pushing now. Finding companies who invest in communities and believe community safety is profitable for them, and like Walmarts and Home Depots and Targets, where some of these critical incidents are playing out. Why wouldn't you want your local departments better prepared? So we've started reaching out to some of those people, and we're really, really green at that. So it's a little bit of an uphill climb for us. I'm not a business background at all. So we've enlisted help, and we're getting it done. But we've gotten some fantastic support from the private donor side. We've got people who want to sponsor their own police departments and are paying 15, 20 grand for us to come in and make sure their local departments are trained up to par.
Outstanding.
It's their kids. It's
Yes,
my
it
kids.
is.
It's your kids.
So we're going to provide links in the show notes where our audience can connect with you, where they can learn more about the amazing work that you're doing, and where they can actually either do a private donation or sponsor. So for those that are either listening or watching right now, in your own community, no matter where it is in the nation, if you have a law enforcement agency that you would like to see doing this type of training, this is a perfect opportunity for you to get involved as a business to be able to sponsor that. So we'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. And as I want to make sure that we are talking about teamwork here for a moment, because obviously you being part of the team of the SEAL teams as long as you were, and also the work that you do today, you see and understand the value and importance of having a solid team. So if you were standing in front of a group of business people today who were looking for ways to build stronger and better teams, what advice would you give to them?
It's communication. Number one, communication. If you don't know what your coworkers are going through, both professionally and personally, it's really hard to build a culture of camaraderie that will reflect an improvement of performance. And one of the best parts about the SEAL teams is, these are my coworkers, but they're also my family. And I'm going through extreme situations with these men that really breed camaraderie and through common experiences, and it reflects in how well we do at our job. And I think if you can incorporate some type of experiential learning outside of your business, that the crucible, right? Putting your people through some kind of, well, it doesn't have to be physical, but difficult exercise. It breeds teamwork and camaraderie and experience, and gives you a common background to fall upon that works well in the business world. And obviously a lot of businesses spend a lot of money on that type of stuff nowadays. So it's great. That's buds for me, right? That's my common denominator with every SEAL. Everybody in the SEAL teams I worked with went through buds, and it's an equalizer in many ways, and it's a common experience of suffering. Not that business people have to go suffer to be better teammates, but that builds a unity in the teams that I will never see anywhere else. It's just so different, and I'm grateful that I got to live through it.
Amazing. So what are 1 to 2 big questions that you're contemplating today?
Every day I wake up, and the question for me is, how can I be better today? And that is a constant thing for me. What can I do today to better myself, to better this nonprofit, to better my for-profit? The other way, and I hate to say it because it's kind of defeatist, but I always ask, did I do the right thing a lot? And my community that I come from, we prioritize the after action review. So looking at our performance prior, analyzing it, making the changes needed, if any, and then putting out a better product on the other side. And I do that in my personal life too. So I tend to debrief myself. Did I do the right thing? Did I make the right choice? If not, what can I do differently going forward?
Is that a daily practice for you, a weekly practice?
Every day.
Every day.
Every day, yeah.
And
it's just a mindset.
Yeah. And if you were to determine that you either, let's just say you didn't do the right thing, that you knew you could have done something different or something more, is that an immediate correction for the following day?
Depending on what it is, it's an on-the-spot correction.
Okay.
I would want to dig into that and find out why I did something that way, and I want to find out how I can do it differently. Because in my own mind, I'd like to think that if I did it that way, it's because it's the only way that I knew. And if I didn't know the right way to do it, I don't want to make the same mistake twice. I'm going to figure out the right way to do that.
Yeah.
And it could be an answer to a question on a podcast that I didn't like. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at that question. And I'm going to find out what would have been a better answer in case anybody asks me that question again.
Interesting. So I would suggest that everyone look at some sort of after-action review. I do this with my own coaching clients, and it's a game changer because it's something that we don't always pay attention to, right? You have to have that level of awareness and intentionality behind it, right? It's not something that you can just decide, yeah, I'll do that, or I won't do it. You really have to heads down, focus on it at the end of the day. And in my case, I document, right? I don't just think about it. I'm documenting those things. So I thank you for sharing that. Sure. So here is, actually, I've got two questions for you. But before I ask you the final question, I would love it if you would give all of us a challenge. What would you challenge our audience and me to do?
I would challenge you to be, and I've seen this a lot lately, and I really like it. It's 1%, right? Be 1% better every day, and whatever it is, just find something to do better. Whether it's your job, whether it's being a parent, whether it's working out, it doesn't matter. And those little victories are motivating. Little victories lead to big victories, right? So if you can change your mindset to be a successful one by finding little victories in your daily routine, it's only going to make you a better person in the long run. So that would be my challenge.
You're speaking my language. I love that. Thank you for that challenge. That's perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So here is my final question to you. So what is one of the most valuable, unexpected lessons that you learned from a fellow SEAL that you didn't expect, right? So it was an unexpected lesson, a valuable one, and how did it impact you?
I kind of a no-brainer. It's my parenting skills, and you don't think that from the community that I'm in. It's kind of and I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's been said a lot. SEALs make bad husbands, but great fathers. And I've learned a lot in parenting my own children from watching some of my teammates parent their children. And it's a community where our style of parenting is going to be different than everybody else's because we are gone so much. And there's extra effort that has to be done to maintain a relationship and keep it to the point where you can step back into your child's life after not seeing them for 6 months and interact with them like you've been there the whole time. And that takes a lot of hard work to do. And I probably was not as good at it as I should have been in the first couple of years of my oldest daughter's life. But I think I've gotten a lot better at it. And I would attribute that to seeing some of my brothers do the same thing.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you. And wow, what an amazing conversation. Andrew, I want to thank you so very much for joining us on Business Minds Coffee Chat. I appreciate you sharing your insights, sharing part of your story, just really pulling back the curtain and helping us understand how you think and the amazing human being that you are and the incredible work that you're doing today, man. Keep after it, and thank you so much for being here. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the questions, and man, great time.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. And for all of you, thank you so very much for watching and for listening. And I do have a quick favor. Would you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts? That helps us greatly in expanding our reach and attracting amazing guests just like Andrew. And to enjoy more episodes, all you need to do is visit jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button, and until next time, keep learning, keep growing, keep working to reach your potential, and we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.